Salvete omnes. This is Gai Iuli Caesaris Commentarii de Bello Gallico Liber Primus, chapter 13. And Caesar writes, Hoc proilio facto, reliquas copias Helvetiorum, ut consequi posset, pontem in arari faciendum curat, atque ita exercitum traducit. So hoc proilio facto. So ablative absolute. So the demonstrative hoc with the ablative proilium, proili, neuter, battle, and then facio, facere, faci, factus, to make or do. This is the perfect passive participle. Training wheels translation with the noun participle. So with the battle having been made. With this battle having been made or done. With this battle done. And from that easy translation, you can get a temporal clause. After this battle had been done. When this battle had been done. You can get a causal clause from this, since this battle had been done, but that's less likely under these circumstances. Basically, you can kind of plug and chug different translations, either temporal, causal, concessive, although this battle had been done, or even conditional, if this battle had been done. Conditionals tend to be on the rare side. It's pretty much temporal here. We're describing the time. So when or after this battle had been done. Reliquas copias Helvetiorum. The accusative reliquas copias, accusative plural feminine of copia I feminine, but in the plural copiae aurum feminine plural, it tends to mean troops or forces. Here it probably means something like forces, and the reliquos aum, the remaining forces, the rest of the forces. So the remaining forces, Helvetiorum, the genitive plural masculine of Helvetius, e masculine, a Helvetian. So the remaining forces of the Helvetians, ut consequi posset. We have ut. Now, ut is kind of out of place here, and we'll put it in its quote-unquote normal place later. But ut, so that, it's going to introduce a dependent subjunctive clause. So hang on, here comes a subjunctive verb. It's not consequi. Consequi is going to be a present infinitive, and it's a deponent verb, so looks passive, please translate as active, and infinitives almost always work with the verb possum, posse, potui. Possum screams out for a complementary infinitive. So he, third person singular, was able, imperfect tense, to consequi, follow up, to overtake. It's not just sequus, sequor, sequi, secutus. Sequels always follow. It's not just following, it's cum sequor, to really follow, to follow something up to the point where you overtake it, you obtain it, you get a hold of it. So it's to follow up, to get a hold of. So this verb can mean to obtain. Here it will mean something like overtake, and its direct object, the reliquas copias, and then the genitive of possession of the Helvetians. So that he might be able to overtake the rest of the forces of the Helvetians. So this verb, this subjunctive verb is posset. We're just being treated to a purpose clause before we get to the main verb. So we have an ablative absolute establishing the time when this took place, so after this battle was done. Then we have a purpose clause here, and the purpose clause is explaining his action. We just don't know what that action is yet. He's going ahead and apologizing for what he's about to do. He's giving us his reasoning so that he might, apologizing is the wrong word, forget that, so that he might overtake the remaining forces of the Helvetians. A pontem, accusative, singular, masculine of pons, pontus, bridge. In arari. Check out the ablative here of arar. Remember that the accusative was ararem with an im. This is the ablative with in arari. So on the arar, the river. The river from chapter 12, the previous chapter, where he slaughtered all of those men, women, and children who were impeditos, encumbered, et inopinantes, and unaware, and he butchered a great part of them while they were trying to cross the river because he's such a strong man. Faciendum curat, faciendum. So that gnarly nd thingy, endum, facio facere. So we have gerund, gerundive, passive periphrastic. So remember, Caesar often works his passive periphrastics without the auxiliary verb being present. It's implied, and that's what we have here. So we have curat. This is the main verb, present tense. It's a historical present, so make sure you note that. How do you know that? Look at the imperfect subjunctive here in the dependent clause. So this is imperfect subjunctive because we have a historical present here. So he took care. Curat, from curo, curare, where you can make a historical present and keep it vividly. So he takes care. So after this battle was done, he takes care that a pontem, faciendum, is to be built, must be built, that a bridge is to be built, faciendum, and it should be esse, because that curat kicks us into an indirect statement, the subject of which is pontem, and that's why we have faciendum, accusative subject to the indirect statement, that a bridge must be built in arari, on the RR. So he takes care that a bridge is to be built on the RR after he did that battle. Notice he calls it a proilium, a battle. It wasn't much of a battle. By his own admission, the enemy, the hostes, the people that he cut down, they were impeditos, encumbered, et inopinantes. Not exactly a fighting force. It's not exactly two armies joining battle on a field and either side knows what's going on and they have a stratagem. This was, he snuck up on them in the pre-dawn hours as they were crossing the river. They had women and children with them. So draw your own conclusions. So was it really a battle? So after this battle was done, in order that, so that he might be able to overtake the remaining forces of the Helvetians, he takes care that a bridge must be built, is to be built on the RR. Atque ita. We have atque instead of ak because the next word starts with a vowel ita. And thus exercitum traducet. And thus he leads his army across. Traduco, traducere, traduxi, traductus. He leads his army across. Another historical present, third person singular. Helvetii. All right, so what are the Helvetians going to do in response? Repentino eius adventu commoti, cum id quod ipsi diebus viginti aegerrime confecerant, ut flumem transirent, illum uno die fecisse intellegerent, legatus ad eum mittunt. And there's that usual refrain. It's like a Homeric formula at the end. Legatus ad eum mittunt. And they sent legates to him. So, the Helvetii, forever sending legates and ambassadors willy-nilly hither and thither around. So the Helvetians, nominative plural masculine, what they doing? Repentino, either dative or ablative. It's probably going to be ablative because that's just how stats work. Eius, genitive, singular. It could be any gender. Eius and adventu. It's the ablative of adventus, us, masculine, the advent. Advent is the season in which we prepare for the arrival of the Christ child. Advent, an adventure, it's something that you start upon or you arrive upon. So advent, you can see ad and venio, venire, veni, ventus. So it's when you come to something. So your advent, your arrival. And Caesar is forever arriving places and people are forever being commoti about it. So commoveo, commovere, commovi, commotus. A commotion would be the noun form. A commotio, commotionis feminine, a commotion. So something that is movere, movi, motus, stirred up, and not just like it's really stirred up. This word can mean to be moved or alarmed, upset. Something is alarmed, upset, and they are the nominative plural masculine Helvetii. And what are they upset by? Well, it's nestled snugly between the participle here and it's a green, it's modified noun. So repentino eos adventu, by the ablative, by means, repentino adventu, and belonging to eos, Caesar. So this is a pronoun standing in for the noun Caesaris. The Helvetians, comma, alarmed, upset. It's probably best to say alarmed. They were pretty like, wait, what? You killed a canton of our population? A canton? A district? A pagos? Alarmed by his sudden arrival. Man, was it sudden? Repentino adventu. His sudden arrival. Cum id quod ipsi diebus viginti aegere me confecerant. So we have cum. So this is not cum preposition with. There's no ablative in sight. What about there? Be quiet. What about conjunction cum? So when, since, although. I'm going to go ahead and cast my vote for when, because I have already said it, but also glanced ahead, and I've seen the mood of this verb. And that verb, that's third person plural, pluperfect, and that is the indicative. So I'm going to go ahead and cheat a little bit and say when. It's my video after all. When you're reading this, you have to go word by word. You hear me? Yes, you heard me. So when, id quod, id, so this is either the nominative or accusative singular neuter. And then quod is going to either be the nominative or accusative singular neuter. This is the relative pronoun agreeing with its antecedent. It's the thing which. Now the question is this going to be the subject or is this going to be the direct object? Because hey, that's the way the neuter rolls. So it's either it, the subject, the thing which, ipsi. Now this relative pronoun kicks us into a relative clause, the thing which. Ipsi, now this is going to be nominative plural masculine, and it refers back to the whoop whoop, the Helvetii, the Helvetians. It's they themselves. The thing which they themselves, diebus, so this is ablative, or dative, be quiet. So ablative, and it's plural, and it's masculine, and it's agreeing with this number here, viginti, or actually viginti, the adjective, is more correctly agreeing with the noun, because that's how adjectives work. They modify nouns. So ablative, it's time when or time within which. It's plural. I'm going to guess time within which. Within 20, viginti, 20 days. Agerime. So agerime. This means, this is an adverb here. It's superlative and it means with greatest difficulty. So very illy. If you're not doing well, you are aiger, you're sick. If you're not doing very well at all, adverbially aigerime. I'm just feeling really, really bad. Not doing so well at all. So aigerime, with great difficulty, with greatest difficulty, with very great difficulty, confecerant. They had conficio, conficere, confeci, confectus. It's a compound of cum and facio. Not just a facio to make or do it, but to really do it. To do something to the point where you finish or accomplish it. So when the thing, this is going to be the direct object of confecerant, the thing which they themselves had done, diebus viginti, 20, within 20 days, aigerime, with great difficulty, ut flumen transirent. And this ut here, it's just renaming what that thing is. It's just giving us more information about the id. And I would translate this ut as, I would say, comma, namely, flumen transirent, namely, so that they might transeo, transire, transivi, transitus, go cross the flumen, the accusative singular neuter, flumen, fluminous neuter, the river. It's the direct object. Illum. Now, illum, this here, we have a strong kind of turn. We've added a new demonstrative here, and ille is stronger than is ea, id. Ille, illa, illud is stronger than that, than ea, id. So ille, that thing that's far away, often in indirect statement, it points out a very emphatic he, she, or it. And here it's pointing out Caesar. This pronoun illum is pointing out Caesarem, standing in for the accusative Caesarem, because we have here an indirect statement. Uno die. Uno, it's ablative, and you know that's ablative. What about dative? No, because unus is a heteroclite, so it's a singular dative, ends in an I. It will be uni. This is uno die. Uno, the adjective, agrees with the noun die. Die is a masculine, day. Fecisse, so this is probably an ablative of time when, or time within which. So this is within 20 days, this is within 1 day, within a single day. Fecisse, so the that would be the perfect active infinitive of facio, facere, feci, factus. Fecisse intellegerent. Third person plural, imperfect active subjunctive of intellego, intellegere, intellexi, intellectus, to understand. So this is the noun clause that they understood. So the Helvetians, they were alarmed. What were they alarmed by? By Caesar's sudden arrival, by the sudden arrival of him, by the sudden arrival of Caesar, by his sudden arrival. Cum. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to readjust my translation. That this is cum, and then it takes this subjunctive verb right here, instead of taking this confecerat. So let's readjust here. Cum, this might further explain an action, so we could say when, since, and although. See, it's always good to, even though you parse, to go back and alter your translation as more information comes to light. So cum, I'm going to start with when. When intellegerent, they understood. When they understood that illum, Caesar, he, emphatic he, fecisse, he had done within uno die, within a single day, and then the direct object of fecisse, where is it? It's id, the thing. He had done the thing which ipsi, they themselves, within 20 days, had completed with difficulty, with the greatest difficulty, namely, to cross the river. And when they understood all that stuff, legatus ad eum mittunt, they send legates to him. So, we have cum. Could also be since, right? So they send legates to him since they understood that he had done within a single day the thing which they themselves had completed with the greatest difficulty within 20 days, namely, to cross the river. So it could also be cum causal, and I think it's cum causal. So it's describing because. This cum to intellegerent, it's describing since they understood. Once they figured this out, and actually once they figured this out is temporal. So either way, you could argue either way. When they understood this thing, they then send ambassadors to Caesar. Since they understood this thing and they realize, we're kind of on the end of our luck and we really have no other choice, they send ambassadors to Caesar. So cum intellegerent. That then kicks us into an indirect statement, the subject of which is illum, its verb, the infinitive fecisse. He had already done within a single day the direct object thing, relative clause, which they themselves had completed with greatest difficulty within 20 days, as opposed to his uno die. Namely, what was that thing? So that they might cross the river. And so they send ambassadors to him. Cuius legationes divico princeps fuit, qui bello Cassiano dux Helvetiorum fuerat. So cuius, the genitive singular, it could be any gender of the relative pronoun, of which often Latin likes to start the next clause or the next part of a sentence or the beginning of a sentence with a relative, in order to strongly relate back to what has come before, or it could be something that is about to show up later. Often, English will prefer the demonstrative, this, instead of Latin's which. Just personal preference. English prefers the demonstrative here. So we'll see what it turns out. Of which, of this, legationis, divico. All right, divico is the nominative. So let's get that straight. That's the nominative singular masculine. That's the dude's name. His name is Divico. I imagine it's Divico, Diviconis masculine. So legationis, legatio, legationis feminine, embassage. It's what a legatus goes on. It's his job. The job of a legatus is to go on a legatio, an embassage, an ambassadorship. So of this embassage, divico fuit princeps. Notice the emphasis on the perfect tense here, that he once was the princeps, he now in the present tense no longer is. So divico was princeps, the chief, the head dude, the guy in charge, the leader, of which embassage, or English, like I said, prefers the demonstrative to link it back to whatever these ambassadors were on in ambassadorship and embassage, a legatio. So Divico was the leader of this embassage, and he's referring to the one that the legatos who were sent to Caesar. Who was this Divico? Why, qui Bello Cassiano, who, referring back to Divico, they agree in singular masculine, gender, and number, not necessarily in case, although in this case, yuck yuck, they do agree. So this is nominative singular masculine, this is nominative singular masculine, because this qui is also the subject of fuerat. Divico is the subject of fuit, qui is the subject of fuerat. Perfect tense, pluperfect tense, so this action happened before this one, who had been the dukes, so predicate nominative. In the let's see, what case would that be? Nominative case. Genitive, plural, leader of the Helvetians, Bello Cassiano. This is an ablative of time. In the Cassian War. In the war with Cassius, meaning the war with Lucius Cassius, the consul. The Roman consul, the one the Tigrines killed. The ones that the Tigrines killed and they forced the survivors to go under the yoke. That consul, that Roman consul, the specific one that Caesar remembered and was upset about. And after he killed the Tigrines at the Ara River in the previous chapter, he said he was avenging both public wrongs, publicas injurias, that would be the slaying of a Roman consul, and also privatas injurias, private injuries, because in that same battle, which now is a bello in a war with Cassius, where Cassius died, the Tigrines, that Helvetian pagus, that canton, had also killed Caesar's father-in-law's grandfather, Lucius Piso. It's a shame. Hate to see it happen. So, whom do the Helvetians send to parley with Caesar? Why, the very man who is the author of Caesar's anger in this matter. That would be Divico. Apparently this guy is still around. How old is he? Because apparently that battle was in the memory of our fathers, Patrum Nostror Memoria. That was in basically 107 BC, I believe. This is 58 BC. How old is Divico? Perhaps he's a little grizzled. So, Divico, who had been the leader of the Helvetians in the Cassian War. Is ita cum Caesare egit. Excuse me. So is refers back to Divico. He, it's the nominative singular masculine of id. Ita, adverb, thus. Cum plus the ablative. This is cum preposition plus the ablative. How rare it is to see it as a preposition these days. With Caesar, Agit. Ago, agere, agi, actus. To act, it's kind of a multi-purpose verb. You kind of use it however you need. So it means in its kind of basic sense to act, and we get the English word to act from ago, from the fourth principal part, actus. But it can mean to deal, to drive, to kind of take your pick, to do. Here it means to deal with, or that explains the cum caesare, or to treat with, meaning that these are diplomats doing diplomat things. They treat with each other. They sue for peace. They make demands. They give unconditional surrender. Diplomat things. So these are diplomats, legati, doing diplomat things. So this is a divico. Agit, he treats. This is actually perfect tense. He treated with Caesar, ita, thusly. And then your English editor has given you a colon. What follows, brace yourselves, but that is one very, very large indirect statement, because that is what he said. This is what Is Divico says to Caesar. He thus treated with Caesar. And this is what he said. On the next slide, I have provided the oratio recta, which means the direct speech of what Divico would have actually have said if Caesar's account, his record of the conversation, this indirect statement, this oratio obliqua, if this is accurate, then we can reproduce Divico's words, the oratio recta, his exact words, a quotation, if you will, using quotation marks. So after we go through this one, this part, the indirect statement, then we'll flip it over and look at it in the oratio recta, direct statement. So first, the indirect statement, the oratio obliqua. Si pacem populus Romanus cum Helvetis faceret, in eam partem ituros, atque ibi futuros Helvetios, ubi eos Caesar constituisset, atque esse voluisset. Si pacem, if. So this conditional if, all right, kicks us off, this conjunction if kicks us off into a conditional. So inside of an indirect statement, conditionals are even more fun than in oratio recta. So conditionals are composed of two parts, a protasis and an apodosis. The protasis, the if part. If I jump in puddles, the apodosis, I will get wet. So the apodosis is the payoff, where the protasis is the for extended. So you throw something out there, the protasis, if I jump in puddles, and the apodosis is the payoff. That's what happens. You get wet. So I will get wet. Inside of an indirect statement, the apodosis, the payoff, that's going to be the accusative subject and the infinitive. The protasis, the part with the if, the part with the Latin si, that's going to be in the subjunctive. So we have si faceret. If faceret, he would make. So it's the imperfect because our main verb is what? It's perfect tense. Our main verb is perfect tense, so keep that in mind. That means that our subjunctive here, it's the imperfect because it's happening roughly contemporaneous or subsequent to the main verb, agit. So if, we could say something like, if he should make, because imperfect, it's showing an action that's either contemporaneous, happening at the same time, or after this. I think it's going to be after this, because the Roman people have not yet made pacem, peace, with the Helvetians. It's something that is a conditional in the future, if this should happen. If the Roman people, notice the nominative here. Nominatives are pretty rare inside indirect statement. They can happen, if you have a subordinate clause, like this protasis of this conditional, in an indirect statement, you can have a nominative. But remember, the subject of the indirect statement, that's going to be an accusative. And the main verb will be an infinitive. That will never change. So if the Roman people were to make peace with the Helvetians, what then would happen? We should be followed by the future. And because we're an indirect statement, we should be followed by the future infinitive for our verb. In eam partem iturros, hey, there it be. We're just missing the helping verb esse. So in eam partem iturros, accusative plural masculine subject, it's right there. But so they, the men, will go in plus the accusative into that part. Which part? Hold on, wait for it. And also, atque, next word starts with a vowel, ibi, and also there in that place, futuros. So not just go, but also be, futuros, be, there, abide. Helvetios, Helvetios. So this is our accusative subject here, the Helvetians. So the Helvetians will go into that part, and there, in that place, they will be, they will abide. Ubi, which part? Ubi, where? That part where eos Caesar, hey look, another nominative, because we have a subordinate clause. This is a subordinate clause showing location, spatial. Which one? Where Caesar constituisset had decided, or I'm sorry, will have decided. Inside this indirect statement, when you see pluperfects subjunctives, they can stand in for what would be a future perfect in oratio recta, because the operative thing about the future perfect tense is that it's perfect, it's done. Even though it takes place in the future, it's perfect, it's completed. It's a completed action that will have happened in the future before the future tense happens. I will have completed my homework before I will play video games. The homework completing has to happen before the video games. The future perfect happens before the future. So the pluperfect here is being used because it's already a done action. It's a perfect completed action. It's completed from the viewpoint of the main verb, which is future tense. So the Helvetians, they will go and they will be where Caesar will have decided them. Will have decided them to atque esse voluisset, will have decided and will have wished them esse to be. So if the Roman people will make peace with the Helvetians will go into that part and there abide where Caesar will have decided and wished them to be. Semicolon. So that's one conditional. That's one option that can happen. That's option A. Sin bello persequi perserveraret, reminisceretur et veteris incommodi populi Romani et pristinae virtutes Helvetiorum. This is the other option. Sin, but if. We have si pacem, sin bello. That's beautiful. Si pacem. If peace, sin bello. If you want peace, this is option A. Sin bello, but if you want war, option B. So we can do it the easy way, or we can do it the fun way. Sin bello, but if. Bello war. Dative or ablative? Not sure here. Actually, probably looking at the next verb, probably going to be dative. Persequi. Persequi. It's not just sequor, like consequor, but persequor. Not just to follow, but to really follow up, to thoroughly follow. So to follow up, and it takes a dative because it's a compound verb, bello, to follow up with war. Perseveraret, perseveraret. Say that 10 times fast. That's third person singular, imperfect active subjunctive of persevero, perseverare. To persevere, to keep on going, to keep it up, to really keep going. But if he should, notice how this is the other option as opposed to the si faceret, sin perseveraret. If the Roman people should make peace with the Helvetians, yada yada. But if the Roman people should persevere to prosecute a war, to continue with a war, reminiscerator et veteris incommodi populi Romani, et pristinae virtutis Helvetiorum. We have two ets. We have et and et, correlatives, both and. So reminiscerator, this is what we remember, these two things, following the et. So reminiscerator, third person singular. It's a deponent verb, so it looks passive. Please translate as active. It means to be mindful. And it's here it's a subjunctive, third person singular. It's going to translate to something like adjussive, something like an imperative in direct speech. So let him be mindful. Let him recall. Let him remember. Something in direct speech like he should remember, or remember, recall. Here it's the use of the third person singular. It's adjussive use, and it's actually kind of polite, as opposed to probably what the real legatus, the real Typico said. Probably something like, dude, remember et veteris incommodi populi Romani et pristinae virtutis Helvetiorum. So these two things following the et and the et. So let him remember, let him be mindful of, and if you translate be mindful of, you translate the verb mindful of, then you'll have the of, and you'll always remember that verbs of remembering and forgetting take the genitive, because you're mindful or forgetful of the object, something. They take genitives. So that's why we have the genitive veteris incommodi, and then populi Romani. Populi Romani, this is the genitive. Genitive of possession, as opposed to the genitive object of this verb. Pristinae virtutis, this is the genitive object of this verb, whereas Helvetiorum, this is the genitive of possession. So it occupies the same space. The object, possession. The object, possession. Let him be mindful both of the old, inconvenience, trouble, problem. It's kind of, he's referring to the battle in which the consul was killed, the earlier inconvenience, the old trouble, the old little problem that you Romans once had. Let him be mindful of the old inconvenience of the Roman people, and the pristinae virtutis Helvetiorum, and the earlier valor of the Helvetians. So this is what Caesar should be mindful of. Let him recall the older problem, trouble, the older trouble of the Roman people when your consul died, and the earlier valor of the Helvetians when we killed your consul. All right, we are still in the indirect statement. Quod improviso unum pagum adortus esset, cum I, qui flumen transissent, suis auxilium ferre non possent, ne ob eam rem aut suae magnopere virtuti tribueret, aut ipsos despiceret. So quod improviso. Quod is something like, what of the fact that? And often in speeches you see this. So somebody is giving a list of grievances. Quod, what of the fact that? Improviso unum pagum adortus esset. Improviso means like unprovoked, unannounced, all of a sudden. I'd say unprovoked. What of the fact that unprovoked, unum pagum, that one pagus, that one district in the accusative direct object, adortus esset. This quote here, or something like given. Obviously, it's a subordinate clause inside the indirect statement because we have the subjunctive here. This is pluperfect subjunctive of ad orior, ad ori, ad oriri, ad ortus sum. So this is something like to rise up against. Here, with some degree of aggression, it means to attack. So he had attacked. That he had unprovoked attacked. That he had unprovokedly attacked. That he had attacked that one district unprovoked. Cum I, when, since, although, ihi, those, which ones? Well, this is the nominative plural masculine, but which ones? The qui, nominative plural masculine, agreeing in gender and number with its antecedent, not necessarily in case, but in this case, oh gosh, that never gets old, does it? They're the same case. So, those who flumen transicent had already pluperfect crossed the river, suis auxilium ferre non possent. Remember, possum screams out for a complementary infinitive like ferre. They were not able to bring aid suis to their own. So circle the su part, draw that arrow to the wop wop subject, the Helvetians. So to the Helvetians, dative own. They were not able to bring the direct object to the indirect object. When, since, although, those who had already crossed the river, I'm adding the already to emphasize the pluperfect, that this action has already been done by the time of the speaker speaking. So when those guys had already crossed the river, they were not able to then, later on, contemporaneously, to bring aid to their own. So that Caesar, that he, had attacked that one district unprovoked, when, since, although those who had crossed the river were not able, probably when those who had crossed the river were not able to bring aid to their own, were not able to help their own. Well, probably since, because here, ne ab eam rem out suae magno pare virtute tribueret out. We have out and out. So ne, don't do something. Ne works with the subjunctive. It's like known, but with the subjunctive. Ne ab eam rem. Ob plus the accusative eam rem is ea id. The accusative agreeing with the going with the preposition ob. It's pretty much equivalent to propter eam rem, ob eam rem. On account of this thing, which thing? This matter that we're currently talking about. Probably that he had attacked this one district unprovoked when their fellows were not able to help them. So he attacked people who were not able, who were kind of shut off from the main group. No one was able to bring them any aid. So Caesar, sneaky guy that he is, he got off easy. Ob eam rem, on account of that thing, either suae magnopere virtute tribueret, suae magnopere. So we've really displaced the suae from the virtute and the magnopere from the tribuere, kind of interlocking their word order here for emphasis. So he should not magnopere. This is the adverb form of magnus. It's a compound of magno and opere, so with great effort, which we would just say greatly, the adverb form of great. He, ne, on account of this thing, suae virtute magnopere tribueret, he ne tribueret, he ought not attribute, ne tribueret, don't attribute. This will show up as an imperative in oratio recta. Here it shows up as like a negative purpose clause or a negative jussive. Don't tribueret. Don't attribute on account of this thing, that you won a small minor victory when you really shouldn't have. Don't attribute it magnopere greatly, very much to dative suae virtute, to your own valor, to your own manliness. Don't attribute this great victory you have to your own manliness. Don't be too proud of this technological terror you've constructed. Aut ipsos despiceret, or despiceret, look down. You can see de spicio, to look down upon ipsos, they themselves, the Helvetians. So he ought not to attribute very greatly to his own valor, or look down upon them because of this thing, because he had attacked that one district unprovoked when those who had already crossed the river were not able to bring help to their fellows. So I think the quote here, that is a causal quote, and it's taking the subjunctive. It's because he had done this, since he had done this. Temporal cum, when, at a time when those who had already crossed the river could not help their friends and family, their loved ones. Since he had already done this, he ought not to attribute very much to his own valor, or despise them, look down upon them, show them contempt on account of this thing. Don't attribute this to your own manliness. Don't think that we are somehow weak because you snuck up on our people. Se ita a patribus maioribusque suis didicisse, ut magis virtute contenderent, quam dolo aut insidiis niterentur. Se, probably the accusative, and it's probably referring to the subject, probably going to talk about the Helvetians, plural. So yes, I know Divico is talking, but he's also talking on behalf of the Helvetians. So maybe it is referring to he himself, and he's going to take on Caesar by himself, but I think it is going to be plural, because, but anyway, that's cheating. Ita, they themselves, the Helvetians, thus, patribus maioribusque, dative or ablative, pater, patres, masculine, father, and the maiores, maiorum, those are the ancestors, the greaters, and ancestors. Suis, their own, so you can circle the su part, draw a circle back to the whoop, or draw an arrow back to the subject, say their own, fathers and ancestors, didicisse, from disco, discere, didici. So to have learned, perfect active infinitive, so it's a perfect infinitive showing a prior action. They, the Helvetians, remember, he's still talking. This is part of the indirect statement. So this is still, he treated with Caesar that. He said that they themselves, that they, the Helvetians, have learned thus, such. They've learned such things, patribus maioribusque suis, from their fathers and ancestors, ut, with the result that this ita kicks us into a result clause. So we have learned such things from our fathers and our ancestors. What things are those? What such things are those? How have you learned from your fathers and your ancestors? So it's an adverb clause answered by result, ut. So that, with the result that, that's how we have learned from our fathers. With the result that magis virtute contenderent, that they contend, fight, strive, struggle, that they fight more with valor, by means of viri, manliness. Quam, than, magis often goes with a quam, more with valor than by dolo, ablative, trickery, dolo neuter, trickery, deceit, aut insidiis, or ambush, insidiae aurum, feminine plural, ambush, plot, stratagem, trickery, niterentor, and this is niterentor, nitor. This takes a dative, to rely on. It's a third person plural, imperfect subjunctive, looks passive, please translate as active because it's that's right, you guessed it, it's a deponent verb. So they, and it's a coordinate with contenderent, with the result that they fight more with valor than they rely upon dative, dolo, trickery, or insidious, deceit. So dolo is actually a dative. Dative. Insidious, actually a dative, because nitor takes a dative. They have learned thus from their fathers and ancestors that they fight more with valor, with manliness, than rely upon trickery or traps. Quare ne commit terret, ut is locus ubi constituissent ex calamitate populi Romani et internecione exercitus nomen caperet aut memoriam proderet. And thus ends the indirect statement, the words recorded by Caesar of Divico. So quare, it's just qua and re, which are in the ablative, on account of which thing, because of which thing, in re, in the matter of. Because of this, ne committeret. Ne committeret, that's working a lot like ne tribueret, ne despiceret. So in oratio recta, this is going to show up as an imperative. Noli committere, noli tribuere, noli despicere. So negative imperative. Because of this, therefore, he ought not to commit. He ought not to make it so. And then this kicks us into whoop, result clause. So that he ought not to do it, so that, with the result that, is locus, this place, ubi constituissent, where they had taken their stand. Notice it's pluperfect. They had already taken their stand. They had already stood up, and there they still are standing, as Divico says these words to Caesar. This is an indirect question. Very good. I heard you through the ether. Where they had taken a stand. Where had they taken a stand? On East Locus, that spot where they had taken a stand. Oh. Therefore, he ought not to commit, so that that place where they had taken a stand, where they had, I guess you could say where they now stood, ex calamitate, ex plus the ablative, calamitas, calamitatis feminine, calamitate from a calamity, a downfall, a ruin, populi Romani, genitive, et internecione, ablative, internecio, internecionis feminine, slaughter, destruction, in internex. Exercitus, genitive of exercitus us masculine, army. Nomen, nominative or accusative singular neuter. And caperet, third person singular imperfect active subjunctive. So that from a calamity, a ruin of the Roman people, and a slaughter of an army, nomen caperet might take a name. Nomen caperet, nomen being the accusative direct object of capio capere, capi captus caperet. So the subject is is locus. So that place, which one? Oh, the one where they had taken up a stance, the one where they now stood. Oh, okay, thanks. So that place where they now stood would caperet, would take a name, aut memoriam proderet, or produce a memory, create a memory, or create a memorial, I guess you could say. Ex, from a ruin, calamitas, calamitatis feminine, a ruin, a downfall of the Roman people, and an internecione, so from an ex calamitate and from an ex internecione, connected by the conjunction et. So from a downfall of the Roman people and an utter destruction of an army. You could add Caesar's army. of Caesar's army, his army, exercitus, you can add an eos, of his army, might make a name, take a name. I guess you could say something like make a name for itself. This place might make a name for itself. Which place? The place where we now stand might make a name for itself from a ruin of the Roman people and an utter destruction of his army, or produce a memory. So altogether, quare ne committeret. Therefore he ought not to commit, he ought not to make it so that this place where they now stood might make a name for itself or create a memorial from a ruin of the Roman people and an utter destruction of his army. So the Helvetians are throwing down. The Helvetians are saying, look, you've already smacked us once. We've learned from our fathers not to take this kind of abuse. We don't put up with this kind of behavior, and we don't do tricks when we fight. So don't make it, Caesar, so that this place upon which we now stand shall make a name for itself, that people might come to this spot generations from now and turn to their children and say, do you know what happened here on this spot? And then they'll sing a little song about how you, Caesar, died on this very spot underneath my blade. So the Helvetians they're throwing down. They are not playing games. All right, let's quickly look at some oratio recta. So here's what the speech sounds like if Divico said it with quotation marks and using the Latin verb inquit, which acts as the Romans' quotation marks. So, si pacem inquit, populus Romanus cum Helvetis faciat. In eam partem ibimus, atque ibi errimus Helveti. Ubi nos tu, Caesar, constitueris, atque esse volueris. Sin bello persequi, perseveravis, reminiscere et veteris incommodi populi Romani, et pristinae virtutis Helvetiorum. Quod improviso unum pagum adortus es, cum ii qui flumen transierant suis auxilium ferri non possent, nolli ob eam rem aut tuae magnopere virtuti tribuere, aut nos despicere. Nos, ita, a patribus maioribusque nostris, dedicimus, ut magis virtute contendamus, quam dolo aut insidiis nitamur. Quare nolli cum mittere, ut is locus ubi constitimus, ex calamitate populi Romani, et internecione tui exercitus, nomen capiat, aut memoriam prodat. Spake he, if the Roman people will make peace with the Helvetians, we will go into that part where we will be, I'll start over. Spake he, if the Roman people will make peace with the Helvetians, we will go into that part, and we Helvetians will be there where you, Caesar, will have decided and will have wished us to be. But if you will persevere to prosecute a war, be mindful both of the former trouble of the Roman people and the earlier valor of the Helvetians. Since you attacked that one canton unprovoked, when those who had crossed the river were not able to bring help to their allies, to their friends, to their family, to their fellows, do not attribute very greatly to your own valor on account of this thing, or look down upon us. We have learned thus from our fathers and our ancestors that we fight more with valor than we rely upon trickery or traps. Therefore, do not commit, so that this place where we now stand make a name for itself or create a memorial from a calamity of the Roman people and the utter destruction of your army.